Well, welcome to a special episode of the Addy Hour. Today, I'm honored to be able to host two scientific directors from the National Institutes of Health for a conversation where we're really going to be focusing on physical and mental wellness and also talking about racial disparities, specifically within the context of our scientific research and in the context of our scientific workforce, also with an emphasis on our scientific trainees. So I'm honored to welcome two guests today, the first of which is Dr. Amy Newman. Dr. Newman is the scientific director at the National Institute on Drug Abuse, a role that she has served in since 2020. And prior to that, she was actually the acting scientific director for 2 years. Dr. Newman received her undergraduate degree in chemistry at Mary Washington College, and also went on after that to a PhD in medicinal chemistry from the Medical College of Virginia and Virginia Commonwealth University, then went on to postdoctoral training at NIDA. Dr. Newman is someone who has been prolific in the field and has contributed immensely to our knowledge in this area. As it was stated during the NIH press release, when she took this position, she has performed work focusing on the design, synthesis, and evaluation of central nervous system acting agents as potential therapeutics for substance use disorders. She has published over 300 articles, is also an inventor on multiple NIH patents. And one of the things that I really appreciate about Dr. Newman, in addition to her outstanding science, is her emphasis on training and mentorship. So in 2019, she received the Kirstein Mentoring Award from the Office of the Director of the NIH. And in 2018, was recognized as a remarkable woman in medicinal chemistry from the American Chemical Society. So someone who has had a lot of impact, both scientifically and in terms of people's training and development over the years. So I'm honored to be able to welcome Dr. Newman to the Addy Hour podcast.
Thank you so much, Nee.
Oh, thanks so much for being here. Our second guest, which I'm pleased to introduce, is Dr. Luigi Ferrucci, who is the scientific director at the National Institute on Aging. Dr. Ferrucci is a geriatrician and an epidemiologist who conducts research on the causal pathways leading to progressive physical and cognitive decline in older persons. He received a lot of his training at Florence, at the University of Florence in Italy, where he also received his PhD and has board certification in geriatrics. He served on the faculty at that university for quite a while, an associate professor of biology, human physiology, and statistics at the University of Florence. And then also between 1985 and 2002 was the chief of geriatric rehabilitation at the Department of Geriatric Medicine and director of the Laboratory of Clinical Epidemiology at the Italian National Institute of Aging. So Luigi is someone who has performed research across several different continents. There's a lot of work both in the US and in Europe, a lot of longitudinal studies specifically looking at risk factors for mobility, disability in older persons. In September of 2002, he became the chief of the longitudinal studies section at the National Institute on Aging and the director of the Baltimore Longitudinal Study on Aging. And then in 2001, became the scientific director at NIA. So someone who has a long-standing history in the field, has made several contributions, and has also served in several different leadership roles. So again, honored to be able to welcome Dr. Luigi Ferrucci to the Addy Hour podcast as well.
Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Yes, I am as well. And I feel like this is a 2-for-1 deal. I know the two of you interact quite a bit, and I'm honored to be able to host both of you simultaneously and to hear some complementary perspectives that you all have in your roles as scientific directors and in your roles in mentoring and in leadership as well. So as our listeners know, I always like to start out just checking in with our guests to see how they're doing. And before we get there, though, I did want to put this in context a little bit as well, because I think there are some things as scientists that we all share in common, especially with everything that's gone on over the last 18 months. I think a lot of us as scientists have become de facto experts for our friends and our colleagues and families, whether we feel like we fit that role as well or not. But just with the way that science has been talked about publicly recently, obviously with COVID, and also with the last election, I feel like science has been elevated in the conversation. Some for good, some for not so good, but it's given us an opportunity in a lot of ways as well. But I know for me personally and others I've talked to, we sometimes become, de facto infectious disease experts or vaccine experts or immunologists or epidemiologists. Of course, Luigi, in your case, that is appropriate in terms of the epidemiology. But I did want to also just talk about the ways that we are also all going through this as well, just like everybody else, and not always an easy journey. So if we could just start, talking a little bit about how you've personally experienced the last 18 months and how that has also played out in your professional role as a scientist working with scientific trainees. So Dr. Newman, if we could start with you.
Thank you, Nee. It has been a roller coaster, and I think that I probably have many people on that roller coaster with me. As you noted, I became the actual scientific director just in November. I was the acting scientific director before that. So within this 18 months, I was also applying for the job that I was in and hope to remain in, experiencing the many changes that we had to quickly make to have people, first of all, work from home and figure out how to do that and then slowly get back. But even now, being distanced and masked and so forth, it has been quite an adjustment. And I think that where I get the most thrill is that we're doing it. And, despite the fact that it's not been easy and there's certainly been trauma along the way, we have figured it out for the most part at just about every level. Not to say that we don't want to get back. We all want to get back. We want to be together and do the work that we do best and that we love most. But I think that I'm really delighted with the resilience that I've seen. And for the most part, the flexibility that we've had to have at every level in order to kind of keep on doing what we're doing, because we can't stop. We're scientists, and not only do we love it, but I think, I really think that work that we do is so important to continue to do in the best way that we can.
Yeah, very well said. And there's a lot of hope there as well. I like that the full picture that you gave, not that it's been easy or there haven't been challenges along the way, but that things are still moving forward. I think that's really important. I appreciate you bringing that out as well. What about you, Luigi?
I certainly I agree with most of what Amy said. It's been challenging. I think the most challenging part to me has been, losing that direct connection, that unspoken language that connect people and scientists, and being able and make an effort to continuously connect with them so that you become the thread that reinforce the spirit of a team. And I have to say that analogously with what Amy said, I'm amazed how people responded to this challenge, how the scientific productivity did not went down. People found any possible way to maintain attention and focus on their work. They could not collect data. They used the data they had to analyze them and write in their paper. They kept having, their lab meeting, virtually. I have to say that people have been marvelous, to me, how they, of course, there's been weaknesses. There have been, some of our trainees, and not only the trainees, have been really subject to great stress. And for me, it's been an attempt to support them in many different ways. And at the same time, I was dealing with my personal situation because my family is in Italy, so we couldn't travel. So I stayed 18 months without visiting my family. And so there was the stress of not traveling, the stress of having to, maintain an institute so that at the end of this period, we will have an NIA and a NIDA that are still alive and can produce that important work that they do. It's a mixed bag. I learned a lot. I think that if we get out from here, if the grip of COVID-19 release, we'll do things differently because we have learned something from this experience.
Yeah, that's very well said as well. There's so many important points that you both brought up. Just the realities of the whole thing. And I like that you talked about the personal aspect for you as well, because you're still leading, even though you yourself haven't seen your family in 18 months. And then Amy, as you mentioned, just the resilience that's been there as well on both sides, even while there are challenges along the way. Several different points I wanted to actually follow up on, but one, Luigi, you mentioned it and hinted at the expectation in a sense for NIA and for NIDA. There's an expectation that the work will continue. How have you seen that impact yourselves and those around you? Has that been good pressure? Has it been challenging pressure? Especially as you said, some have thrived under this, but some have also had challenges with the stress. Anything that you've noticed that's come out with that?
I think globally we are done fantastically. I think that there's been episode of difficulties, but even those that went under stress, are adequately supported, they were able to come out positive. I've seen that people were highly receptive to discussion, to communication. And so in general, certainly not everything went as perfect as we wanted. And one of the things that you said at the beginning, for example, is very important. At some point, everybody became expert in epidemiology of viral disease. Everybody was a virology. Everybody was trying to write on COVID-19. Initially, I was kind of upset for that. This is the science. You can't really improvise yourself to be. But then I realized that to some extent, this was a coping strategy. Instead of being only the receiver of the negative effect of COVID-19, being a protagonist and contribute in some way or in another with your scientific expertise, the solution of the problem. And so I realized that, all these, trying to elaborate the new ideas, especially in the field of aging where COVID-19 is really being hitting the weaker. And, older people are certainly one of the weakest components of our population. It was really extraordinarily positive. So in the end, I think that my view is very positive. I think, as I said, we'll come out from this a little bit better than we were before. That's what I think it is.
Mm-hmm.
I think from our side, there's two groups that really suffered a lot. And one were those who are who have small children at home or school-age children at home. And this does hit not only our postdocs and junior faculty, but also many of our administrators who we completely depend on to keep us going forward, and having to figure out how to teach your children from home and get your kindergarten on a laptop and those kinds of things, I think was extremely stressful for that group. And I think some of them really felt like they were not able to move forward in the job that they wanted to do because they had this whole new job that was extremely new to them and not something they were necessarily good at, and they had to do it. There was no other choice. I think that was really tough. The other group, are clinical researchers, and we work with substance use disorders, and that has skyrocketed during COVID. I mean, that is just a tremendous number of overdose deaths, much higher than it has been in several years, and can't even do our patient studies. We can't do our clinical work right now to the degree that we had before. We've just started to open up some clinical studies this summer, but it's at a much slower capacity. And so I think our clinical researchers feel frustrated because this is what they do, and that's the patient population that they want to serve. It's really suffered, and they're kind of, if anything, slow, but almost stopped in their tracks for the last 18 months.
What have been some of the ways that you all have tried to address that in the meantime? Just being in that place of, it sounds like a mixture of one, feeling stuck, and two, not being able to help the people that you feel like you're called to serve as well. So how have you addressed that?
Well, I think that the most difficult part is that when you are in the building, when you meet people in the corridor, when you get coffee with them, when you have all these informal meeting with them that they're not predisposed, you keep track of what is happening. You're feeling the sense of whether there is something wrong that's going on in the people, the gesture, their posture, the way they, say hello to you for a moment. And I felt that I was completely missing that. For example, this is a stupid episode, but I'll tell you how much this was important. During Christmas time last year, I had so much longing for the people that work in my office of the scientific director that I visited each one of them. I went to their home, I saw them for 1 minute, but we were face to face.
Mm.
And I don't think they got a lot from it, but I did. I felt that human connection was reconstituted. And what I'm afraid is that while our productivity will be high, reestablish those informal and hard connection is not going to be automatic. We will need to work hard to do that, and I intend to do it. By having meeting with people, creating informal and formal way of creating groups that even not based on the scientific, but Thursday last week, at the end of the day, we went for a walk. Masking, everything was.
Mm-hmm.
It was incredible. Talk to people just for 2 miles of walking, but interacting with them, and see how bright and inventive and creative they are. I think that gave me a lot, but I think that also they felt that, their scientific director, their leader was with them. And I want them to feel that I am with them as I learn from them, and I feel that they are, in my same journey.
That's great. All on the journey together. Amy, anything you were going to add there as well?
That's I did not do the one-on-one like that, but one thing that we did was that we had listening sessions on Zoom, but one-on-one with every single faculty member, and they had just 30 minutes. But I had 2 questions. One is, tell me about the most exciting project that you're working on or you want to work on, and then tell me the challenges that you have to prevent you from moving forward as quickly or as effectively as you want to. And they were, and we did this with all the faculty, and then we did it in groups with our staff scientists and staff clinicians, and we even did a group with the postdocs. And I think that it was so super fun. It was great to see that enthusiasm despite the situation. It was very informative to hear what the challenges were. Many of I knew, but some of them I didn't. And also I didn't know how many people found certain things to be challenging. And so that gave me my orders to move forward and try to fix those things. But especially with like my staff, scientists and staff clinicians, they said, I've never had a chance to talk to my scientific director. This is the first time I've ever talked to my scientific director. They ever asked me to have a conversation. And, I got a lot out of that, but I think they did too. And the other thing that I did this summer, because we could do it, I have a nice backyard. We live kind of out in the country, and we lined up big picnic tables, and I invited my whole group for outdoor lunch. And I made lunch, and we were all outside, and it was so fun. I mean, we hung out here for hours, and it was just a great chance to be together. And again, I loved it, but I think they really loved it too. And, it's just a one-off. I wish I could do it more often. This is something that I really like to do. Luigi and I both love cooking, and we love to entertain. And it's something that we've really not been able to do like we like to. But those little tiny gestures seem to have been useful for all of us.
Yeah, that's great. And I appreciate you peeling back the layers, because as you were both talking about how, groups are still here, people are still moving forward. That was one thing I was just really wondering, like the layers underneath that, what you had done. It sounds like it's been some new creativity in that sense too. And, as we were talking before we started the session as well, the things that we don't get trained on as scientists, but which I think we're all becoming much more aware of the importance of, Amy, just having people over, having those touch points, Luigi, having your drive-bys to just connect with people and connect and chat with them, and how important that is for all of us in so many ways.
I mean, you learn, that, but you learn more and more that only a place that make people enthusiastic and happy becomes productive. You need to make them want to come to work. You need to make them being, thinking that the best thing they can do is to interact with the group. And if you're able to do that, that is an incredibly powerful force. You don't really have to teach them how to pipette. You need to tell them if they come here and they pipette, they will make a discovery, and they will be extremely happy because of that discovery. I think that that is the most important thing that we need to do as leaders. And then they will grow professionally by themselves. somebody told me once that when you have trainees, you don't have to take their hands continuously. You are like a flight control, person that follow them and you tell them where to go, but they actually know where to go. And you only intervene when there is bad weather or when they, for some reason, are losing their direction. And then you have to go there, put them in the right direction, and then allow them to fly by themselves. And I find that creating a good environment and a safety net where they know if they get in trouble, there's somebody there that will help them is really the best way to handle our trainees.
Yeah, it sounds like you're just building a community and making sure that it's sincere, authentic, and that people know that you're there to be supportive, which is so important. And would you say those are similar principles that you try to apply as well?
It reminded me of a quote from your previous podcast, Dr. Ressler and Jones Marlin, when they said, in quotes, cohesion can buffer trauma. And I love that. I wrote that down because I thought, yes, if we have that community where we have these relationships, which I think are so important. And like Luigi, I want people to love their science. I want them to be able to pipette, or in my case, I want them to be able to run a reaction and not blow themselves up. It's really important.
Yeah.
But, having said that, what I always say to them is, it's as important to really work on your communication skills and your development of relationships. Because as chemists, we can make compounds all day long. But if I don't have neuroscientists and behavioral pharmacologists and computational biophysicists and all those people to help me put those molecules into perspective and to help me know what tools are needed and then give me the opportunity to say, wow, we just made something that nobody else has ever made. And we just unlocked a biological secret that would have been continued to be elusive without people. And that's the thing I think is so much fun about what we do, and I hope is the role model that we play as scientific directors for all those who work with us.
Yeah, so important, so well said. Just the importance of that diverse community in terms of our science and our teams and things like that. And of course, that brings up a topic that I wanted to kind of touch on as well, because clearly the scientific diversity is so important, but we've also been just trying to walk through all the racial diversity issues, the racial reckoning that many of us are trying to walk through, and hoping that it's a true racial reckoning, but then also seeing ups and downs along the way and all the racial disparities. I know both your institutes have aspects of health disparities research as well, but I'm just curious, as we've been talking along the lines of COVID, like how have those components impacted you all on a day-to-day basis in your roles as directors and in your interactions with your teams?
So I guess that one of the things that's come out of it for us is, again, this kind of grassroots growing of acknowledgement of the importance of that. And not only do we have kind of a faculty-led diversity committee, but we have a trainee-led started, and it's called the IDEA Committee, Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and they're educating us. So every month they send out an email where they're explaining, some aspect of racial diversity or during Black History Month or different things. And they're educating us. They're bringing speakers into our institution. What they are doing is being part of the solution, which frankly, we need everyone. And I think to be part of that solution and to try to help us improve and really recognize the importance of diversity in that community and how it really brings science to the very best that it can be.
That's great to hear. Luigi, anything you want to add there?
I think that what Amy, said is absolutely in the right direction. I have the feeling that we need to attract, more. As an NIH environment, we have so much to offer. And so we're not doing enough outreach. We're not showing our cards around, showing how much being NIH could be a very successful environment, for everybody and, for underrepresented minority, for disadvantaged, young trainees. And so, why? And I think that at some point I did not realize that I was part of the problem. Because yes, I thought we need to reach to minority, diversifying our workforce is important. But one of many things that they needed to do. And I am glad that at some point this was transformed into a central theme. And so we got a lot of information. And in a way, I realized much more that this was an incredibly important, part of what NIH needs to transform itself and become, a true scientific enterprise. And so in that time, I think that many try to address the problem. I still feel that we don't have enough people coming in when we advertise for our position. So what do we need to do is to go and stimulate, the progress of young investigators that are attracted by coming to NIH and realize their scientific dreams. So I think that we're doing a little bit of outreach, but I think we should do better. I thought, I'm discussing with some of the other scientific directors, we should create a movie about what NIH does, showcase some example of high success, show the technology and the good stories that, have been realized in NIH, and then go to the different academic institutions. But if we do not expand that base, I don't think the solution is fighting for the few candidates. I don't think the solution is that Yale and NIH fight to get that candidate and offer more. We need to expand that base because the base is there. So we need to find a way to realize that. And I think that many people now are really considering that it's an important part of our mission. And so I'm hopeful that with some up and down, as you were explaining, I think that, of course, the political, situation where we live will impact that. But if we have enough time, I think we can make a dent on this problem.
And again, that makes me think about the importance of the community aspect as well, both the community and the communication, because you're talking about making sure that the community is projecting and expanding, but that through the communication of those in the community to make sure that other communities are pulled in as well. And I think that's really important. And as well as what the environment is like. And Amy, as you were mentioning, it's encouraging to hear about the trainees stepping up and providing those resources and all those things as well. I was going to ask a follow-up question there, because that even in itself can sometimes be a point of tension as well, in terms of where the onus is with the trainees as they are going through their training, taking on extra work. So how is that whole dynamic playing out? Because we've seen it in a lot of ways. Black and Neuro is a good example as well, where the trainees have really stepped up and done a tremendous job, but also know that they need to balance their time in terms of being trainees, and that they also need the support of administrators to actually implement some of the changes and to be able to incorporate. So have those conversations been part of the process? It's not, from your responses, I'm thinking it has been.
The thing is that what a wonderful time to learn it, right? So when you're in this kind of post-baccalaureate or postdoctoral time, you're learning science and how to figure out how to do research and so forth, but also that you're not just a scientist. As Luigi said in the beginning, if we're just scientists, we're not doing our job. We really need to learn to do these other things and find out what we're good at. Not all of us are good at all things. That's why the diversity comes into being so important. And so, yes, I think some of our trainees end up spending a lot of time on these committee responsibilities and not so much time in the laboratory. And then sometimes we have to reel them back in a little bit. But on the other hand, if that's what they really love and that's how they really contribute, then I think that's great. I mean, one thing I was going to go back to with regard to the community, not the scientific community, but in Baltimore, for example, you wonder why the National Institute on Drug Abuse is in Baltimore. And it's largely because Baltimore had the drug abuse problem. Bethesda didn't. Baltimore has had an opioid crisis for a lot longer than the rest of the country has. And yet we still have trouble recruiting subjects into our studies. And I think in part there is this, they don't know that we exist, that we're there. In part, there is a distrust for government. Experimental work, and we have to somehow figure it out. And I don't have the answers for all this. This is really where I'm trying to find better ways to do things and trying to encourage our trainees and others, faculty members, to try to break down some of those barriers, because we are not going to address the health disparities, particularly substance use disorder, if we can't get subjects into our clinical trials and our studies and understand what works and what doesn't. Mm-hmm. And that's a big challenge that we are really not doing well. And I think that that's one of our big challenges going forward.
Yeah, and it seems like it has so many ramifications as well, as you've talked about, just from the research itself and the community and impact. I know, within, and I'm going to not remember exactly the name of it, but I know there is a big push to make sure that there is more diversity in terms of GWAS studies. So some of the local Baltimore groups have gotten involved in that with the African ancestry recruitment. I know, I think Kaf Dazira and Yasmin are both on that advisory board. I'm forgetting the name of the principal investigators there, but I know they're working with local church leaders and things like that. Are there conversations about trying to do similar types of things like that within NIA or at NIDA? I'm just curious, I know we're outside of the trainee realm a little bit, but that has such an important impact on society and what the trainees are walking into. I'm just curious to hear how those conversations
Everything is connected. I think that one of the things that is happening is NIA that is now, leading the research on Alzheimer's disease and related dementia, has just created, a new initiative, which is called CARD, the Center for Alzheimer's Disease and Related Dementia. Mm-hmm. And we will have a new building in Bethesda that is currently, I wouldn't say half finished. We can see already the building. But one of the things that we want to do is exactly what you said, doing research on neurodegenerative disease that span across multiple populations, so we can leverage on the fact that there are multiple populations that look at the differences and the similarity and connecting with the epidemiology. I think that the genetic assume, much more sense and become much more informative when it's diversified. Mm-hmm. But one thing I want to say that is connected to what Amy said, and that really I struggle with, is that, the Washington-Baltimore area is so filled with research institutions that people are kind of tired in participating in stuff because we don't give them back enough. We need to find ways to give back to the community. When we involve them, we need to find a way that people feel more involved. People feel that, they're part of a project. They're not just, our, animal model that we're using for our studies. And I've been struggling to finding ways because, even some of the ethical constraints we live in do not allow, for example, to provide them care. And so, but I think we need to bend these boundaries. We need to find ways so that research become part of the community and it's not using the community to generate papers. If we do that, I think that the involvement of people will be much, much higher.
Oh, that's so important. And it sounds like, you're hinting at some of the policy pieces around that as well. But do you think there's also a communication aspect of it? Or is it one or the other, both in parcel? Just curious your thoughts there.
Both of them. I think that when people come to the Baltimore Longitudinal Study of Aging and we ask them when they leave after 2-3 day visit to write down, their impression, one of the things they want to know is what do you do with the data that we give you? And so they want newsletter. They want to be informed. They want to know, what their contribution and their generosity resulting to. And we try to do something that, maybe is not strong enough.
Yeah. I know I keep saying the same thing, but again, it sounds like community and the community that extends outside of the research, but is involved in the community at large, and that we're all working in the same goals together as a community, whether we're participants or researchers. So I'm trying to keep saying it, but it keeps coming up.
It's the answer. I think that's a brilliant idea, Luigi, and how to amplify what we're giving back to them and how recognize that they're getting something out of it too That's a really big challenge. We have a clinic that we provide treatment methadone and buprenorphine for people who are addicted to opioids, but it's small, and I think we could expand that. But then it gets into this, like, are we using NIH research dollars for treatment? And so again, there's these back and forth. It's I don't know that there's a clean answer, but there's got to be a better answer than what we have right now.
Mm-hmm. And it seems so important that, I mean, in some ways the solution isn't there, but it's also encouraging to hear that that's a point that you're both wrestling with and thinking about and trying to improve.
You know, one thing that we are really trying to increase is even like getting out into the high schools and going to the science fairs and being judges and being involved. And maybe, again, if we can get the kids involved and then they go home and they talk to their parents or their family members or their church members, and it kind of, again, this, I'm sounding like I'm being redundant, but this kind of grassroots way, but I think that, you know, trickle down just hasn't done it. And I think that maybe that's another possibility.
Yeah. So really intentional in that sense as well.
Yeah. Like we collect money and we make give money awards for these that come from us for these Baltimore science fairs. Just, it's, you know, it's not a lot, but it's a little bit. And they, not only do they win, but they get a little money, and it's kind of exciting. And I mean, those are small things. I think that there can be much bigger ideas coming forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so important in a lot of ways. I also want to loop back and tie in one of the points that you made earlier too about the trainees and everything they're doing to really make large impact and the balance with the science. Because I feel like in a lot of ways, at least for me personally, I feel like the groups that are coming up are doing a much better job of that than I did, even, you know, when I was in that position. You know, some of these, you know, more public facing things I didn't start till I was well into my career. It kind of settled, but I feel like that passion is there and it's important, and they're, you know, running with it in a lot of ways. They're exemplary and things that, you know, we can all learn from that. But then you also talked about kind of the tension between the research and the outreach work. And so how are you all encouraging that or modeling that? And then also, you know, similarly in your roles as well, are the ways that you also try and balance that in your own lives? And how does that impact kind of this ongoing conversation and tension between different passions and where to pursue them and how to balance that? So any insights that you all have that you've shared with trainees or continue to?
I want to say, you know, what you say is true, and we do titanic effort. I know that, you know, there's no one single weekend that I don't try to work and to, you know, accomplish everything that needs to be done. But, you know, to put a difficult note, I think that, you know, spending our day from 8 o'clock to 7 o'clock in the evening in front of Skype or Zoom doesn't make our life easier. You know, I think that I feel like at the end of the day, I'm completely exhausted. So why doing the same thing that I was doing before COVID-19 require double of the effort? You know, I think that's important to understand this. And as we do it, that we are, let's say, you know, the stronger link. You know, we need to be the one that never crack, because, you know, people should see us as an anchor of to you know, that they cannot be attached to. You know, our scientists, our staff scientists, our trainees are experiencing the same problem, you know, the same kind of exhaustion. And so, you know, you go back to the idea that of mutual support. You know, I think that, and you're right when you say that this generation are, especially in the trainee, people that are more likely to help each other. Some of them get into crisis, the other come in and try to be a support network. This is certainly happening in many of our labs. You know, even when there is a real crisis, you can see that, you know, people get together, if not physically, at least virtually, and create the support to each other. And we need to encourage that. You know, for example, in my lab, is one of my staff scientists that organize, you know, happy hours every Friday afternoon. And you know, people come and go and they're there. And that's an opportunity for them to connect and also to hear what's happening to others. You know, I say before, my fear is that something is happening that will lead to something bad, and I don't perceive that because I'm not there. Because you have one-on-one conversation, the buzz that is in the building that you can hear without paying attention is no longer there. And that is the part that we're missing that is extremely dangerous and important.
I think that I have a very strong self-preservation streak. So I know that I cannot work 24/7. And in fact, I hate that term. One of the things that I do every week is I write a little message to my whole intramural program. It's just like from my heart to their ears. They can or not, they can delete it or they can read it, but it's always something personal. And one of my messages some months back was 24/7. Get rid of that term. Nobody really works 24/7, and no one should even say that they work 24/7. And I think at the end I said something like, the only thing you really can do 24/7 is breathe. And I support that.
Yes, definitely well said. Yeah. So important.
You have to model that. I mean, I think that it's easy to just always work and always, pedal as fast as you can. And I do think that in my messages and just in my life, I do try to exemplify that I love my work and I love the work that we do and the collaborations we have and so forth. But you know what? I also made a dozen containers of pesto this weekend because I harvested a lot of my basil, or, I'm having 12 people for crabs tonight because my son just flew in from WashU. He's a neurology resident. He just flew in this afternoon and we're having 12 of his friends for crabs. That we have to show that we also are human beings and that you have to be able to take care of yourself, because if your well is dry, you don't have anything to give. And I don't think that that's good for anybody.
That's really important. I'm glad you're being so vocal about that in a lot of ways too. Do you feel like that is getting incorporated into the culture? Because I would say, if I ask many of the trainees that I work with, they would say that's not always their impression. Their impression is they have to stay on the grind. Yeah. This is their formative years. If they take a step back or take a time to breathe and pause, someone else will continue that work and have the position that they were looking for. So how is that getting incorporated in the culture, or do you think this is a unique perspective that you're
I can say about that, Nia, is when I said we took a vacation this summer, and one of my messages was I was going on vacay, and I had so many people send me messages and say, thank you. Now I feel like I can go on vacation, or I can tell people I'm going on vacation, because we're so in a leadership position. I think a lot of times we're so afraid to admit that we're going on vacation. Oh, wow, we're not watching the place every moment. And I think that it's that, but people need to keep on working hard and want to work.
I can think, the balance between life and work, it's really important. And of course, we need to, but I also think that everybody is different. I mean, I don't think that there is one measure for everybody. I think for some of the trainees, for example, working really, really hard, give them the sense that they're not losing the opportunity of their career. Some are more relaxed and they accept the idea that, maybe that this is happening to them. But, I always reinforce the idea that, NIH has been fantastic in this crisis. We have been given to people, I don't know who, we've been given incredible flexibility. You have to deal with the children. You don't have to come to work, because we understand that the value of maintaining the health of our society, we alternate people, so we don't have, too much concentration of people in the building. There has been incredible support. I have to tell you that this amount of flexibility, to some extent, surprised me. That this was possible. It was really a discovery. And I think that has been a really fantastic choice to do that, because that allowed people to relax enough in the moment of crisis. But as I said, some people, when I tell them to relax, they just look at me like I'm crazy, because they don't want to relax. They're losing ground, so they want to work night and day. And if they want to, I can't really teach them who they are. They know who they are. And so I think that I need to support them for what they want to do.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really important. Really well said. I love hearing about that flexibility as well, because I mean, it ties back to the point that you both made at the beginning as well, that things really seem to be continuing in terms of the work and the productivity. And that just shows me that the flexibility, even though some might say that's detrimental, from the way that you both responded, has not been detrimental at all, as things have continued and as people have been able to continue to move forward. But to your point, Luigi, as well, just the individuality that's there, and people have to know themselves and what works for them. But Amy, it still sounds like in some ways you're also empowering people by just saying that you are going on vacation, and people are having the freedom to incorporate that as well. So it seems like on all layers, you're showing that, but then also people are still learning from it as well. But I think it's such an important point to know that it's an individually based piece. I always, with new trainees that come in, I always tell them how I've had trainees that I've had to tell to spend more time in the lab because they weren't putting the effort in. But I've also had trainees I've had to tell to spend less time in the lab because they were spending so much time overthinking, basically running themselves into a wall, spraying themselves thin, that when they took a pause, they were like, oh, I can actually think more clearly and use my time more efficiently. And they actually got more productive spending less time. That's obviously dangerous to share because sometimes, people could be tempted to take that to extremes, but I think it's important to know that balancing act is there, and people need to know where they need to take their breaks and where they need to continue to move forward.
By the way, Amy, during the weekend, I made tomato sauce and peach jam. So
I can't wait to come to your house and eat some of it, Luigi.
You can try them.
Yes, there's definitely a food vibe going on here as well. You both are going to have to be careful because you're going to have a lot of requests after this episode once people hear that.
One of the things that Luigi did before the pandemic, and I'm sure he'll do it again because we're really limited with what we can do with awards. So like poster awards and things like that, they get a little paper plaque. And Luigi has the winners to his house for dinner. I mean, that's a really big incentive. I love that. And I think that I would love to be able to do that too. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
That sounds like a great incentive to me.
Trust me, if you've ever had
lunch. Well, come and visit and, some Italian food, you will know Victoria, I promise you.
I'm excited already. Well, I know that our time has gone very quickly here, which doesn't surprise me, and perhaps we'll have to do this again in the future as well. But just to tie in, and I'm just curious to hear from both of you what you're hopeful for in the months ahead. I mean, you've both talked about some of the resilience and the ways that we've been creative, but what are you hoping for as scientific directors and for your institutes and your trainees as we move forward? Luigi, we'll start with you this time. I know that's not a light question.
Well, as I said, I hope that the grip of COVID-19 will be released soon. And then we can take back our journey with the new awareness of what this pandemic had taught us and how important it is to remain connected as a community. And how, as you said before, maintaining flexibility will not put us down, but will actually support us as a community and make us more productive. I think that my hope that will come out from this fast enough so that we can fully recover. I have a little bit of fear too. And the fear is that if this thing goes on for a long time, that, unprocessed language, that connection that we had, as more new people come in, will be lost and will be very, very difficult to recreate. It will be a measured effort to recreate that language that is informal and is not verbal. And I will certainly try to, push that project, but in the back of my mind, that's what I'm afraid of. Although, in general, I'm very hopeful for a positive, exit from this.
All right. I appreciate that level of honesty.
And I want to embrace people. I want to people. That's what I want. I want the world of friendship and connection.
Yes, definitely hoping and looking forward to that as well. Amy, what about you?
I mean, I think that for me, the thing that I'm most excited about is that during this time period, as I've just become the SD and under the whole pandemic thing, we've been working pretty hard behind the scenes to make some pretty big changes and in the way that we do business at NIDA. And I am so excited to see this pan out. And I feel like we've got the next year or two, there's a lot of new things that we're bringing in, and really, I hope, pushing the translation that I've always wanted to have happen as a chemist. I'm really sure that I've cured enough rats of cocaine abuse, but I'd really like to get that beyond rats. And I think that we're putting some things in place that I think are going to be fantastic. We've got some new recruits that are not only fantastic themselves, but very committed to diversity. I think are going to really bring in some new ideas for outreach. And I'm just can't wait for that to happen, but I recognize that it's not going to happen right away. So I guess that what I'm hopeful for is that the lessons that we've learned and the resilience that we've demonstrated in the last 18 months will continue to follow us as we deal with whatever this coronavirus is going to deal to us. And I'm an optimist. We're going to get through this, and we're going to be better for it. It's just we just have to hang in there.
So well said. Well, I'm excited to hear about the new initiatives as well, and all that's been brewing and that you all been working on so hard. And I also appreciate, I know just the sense between you and Luigi of just the camaraderie amongst the institutes and the similar aligning and parallel goals in a lot of ways. So it's encouraging for me to hear just the way that things have continued to move forward. I'm definitely interested in doing an extended conversation at some point as well, and even coming back to some of these ideas in the future. So hopefully at some point in person, even though we've all been virtual up to this point, but definitely appreciate it. Go ahead.
Anytime.
Excellent. Well, it's been great meeting both of you officially. I know we've corresponded beforehand, and I appreciate, again, just your level of candor that you shared on this Addy Hour podcast. I know it's going to be a unique setup in a lot of ways, but something that I think will really be important as we've peeled back the layers. So thank you again to Dr. Amy Newman, Dr. Luigi Ferrucci for being willing to come and to join on this Addy Hour podcast. And to all our listeners, have some exciting episodes coming up in the future as well. So definitely stay tuned.